previously.
A body is found on a deserted road. The body had no hair and she was laying in a fetal position. Upon further investigation, it was indeed Kristen French.
We don't feel safe anymore. You know, you just don't. It's just, you know, ask yourself, how did this happen? Why? And
this is where things get interesting. You see, our dream couple, well, they were having issues. What some might call trouble in paradise. You see, Paul, well, he was beating his wife black and blue. And one day, he beat up Karla so bad that she had no option but to go to the police. And this was the beginning of the end. Karla Homolka was now under police protection.
Being physically and verbally abusive to me at that time, as you know.
And as far as the police know, Paul Benardo was just a wife beater. Little did they know that this case was a doorway to solving the two most high-profile murders in Canadian history. Karla leans in and tells the police that her husband, her Prince Charming, was indeed the murderer of both Leslie Mahaffey, age 14, and Kristen French, age 15. Now she had their attention. She further stated that her husband had videotaped the whole thing. Doesn't end there. Karla recounts that Paul would drive around the neighborhood stalking girls and victims, and his ultimate goal was to have a sex slave for himself.
He wanted to have it over and over and over again. That's why his ultimate fantasy was to have like sex slaves.
Remember the stranger that gave Leslie Mahaffey a ride on the night of 15th June 1991? Well, Karla told the police that that was Paul. Karla continues by saying that she knew Leslie was in their home basement for about 3 days.
I had to, because when I took Buddy out, there were 2 champagne glasses on the dining room table. And we had these really expensive champagne glasses from France, which we never used. He had those out. The 2 of them had been drinking champagne from those glasses.
And for about 3 days, he sexually assaulted her multiple times. Then he strangled her to death. And with the chainsaw, he cut her open, filling her up with concrete, and later dumped her body in Lake Gibson.
She recounted her version of how Leslie Mahaffey met her death.
And then she took a breath. And that freaked me out even more. He should have slapped me in the face, because I was really hysterical then. So he went over to her and he did the same thing, he strangled her more. And I think I watched that time. What the hell, she's dead anyway.
Let's talk Kristen French. Karla later stated that she was forced to go on that mission, where she was told if they see a girl, she was to distract her, and Paul would grab her.
We saw her and pulled into the parking lot, and he told me what to do. I didn't even think. What I was supposed to do is call her and ask her for directions. Get out of the mouth. Get out of the car and leave the door open, and he was going to come around and then put her in the car. So that's exactly what happened.
How was he supposed to keep her in the car?
He had a knife.
Oh, it's not over. He did ungodly things to her that words alone cannot explain. After Paul was done, he shaved her head, rolled her up in a carpet, and dumped her on the side of the road where police found her. After disclosing this information, she said for the safety of all girls and women living in St. Catharines, and her safety as well, they had to arrest him. So on 17th February 1993, Paul Benardo was in police custody. Homolka told police that her husband told her during their honeymoon in Hawaii that he was indeed the Scarborough rapist. And police were about to confirm this accusation because if you remember from earlier, Paul took a DNA test. Well, let's just say it came through. February 1993. 2 years after Paul Benardo's DNA samples were taken, they finally matched it to the DNA from all the sexual assault victims. So now the police had the Scarborough, and it all added up. The media now had their story of the Scarborough, but the police, oh, they were still playing their cards very close to their chest on accusing Benardo on these murders.
The murders of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey.
There's a twist that brings this case even closer to home.
Metrosexual assault investigators have now confirmed in the past half hour that Paul Benardo, according to sources, being charged as the Scarborough rape.
Because they never had any evidence on him, other than Karla Homolka's word, which could have been a ruse so her abusive husband could be put behind bars. Karla had already told the police about these tapes that would paint her as a credible source and give the police evidence to lock her husband away forever.
If a man is being pointed to and accused of murder, why haven't they executed a search warrant inside? Why hasn't the man been charged with murder?
We will be working in that house over the course of the next several weeks.
So the Canadian police get a search warrant. And after those 70 days of constant searching at the Paul and Karla residence, they found nothing, because Karla herself didn't know where the tapes were. Then comes a man by the name of Ken Murray. He was Paul Benardo's lawyer. And let's just say this man held this case at the palm of his hand. Here's why. 6th May, 1993. Paul Benardo gives Ken Murray a hand-drawn map on where to find the tapes. And when he got to the house with his assistant, he found the tapes in one of the bathroom ceilings. When he viewed the tapes, he saw a couple of things that Karla didn't account for in her statement. The first thing is that the tapes discredit her as a liable source of information because they show her raping and torturing Leslie and Kristen alongside her husband. Not only that, they also showed her sister, her actual death, where she was drugged and sexually assaulted by both of them. Karla is no longer a victim, but an active suspect. But old Ken Murray, he has a genius idea to hide the freaking tapes from everyone. The police at this point were frantically trying to build a case against Benardo, and the only evidence they had was the testimony of a liar. You see, Ken had the opportunity to blow this case wide open, but he had this genius idea to just look away. Karla at this point realizes that if they find the tapes, which at this point Ken already found the tapes, they would find footage of Tammy, her younger sister. And this is where she comes out of the shadows with a disturbing story about Tammy.
It's my little sister. Paul approached me wanting to have sex with Tammy. He kept on pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally I said okay, and thinking that it wouldn't be, it would just be one time, that's it. It would shut him up, and he would stop bothering me and stop hurting me. Decided that we needed the halophane, and the fact that sleeping pills might not keep her completely asleep.
Those burns are possibly chemical in nature and antemortem.
The only chemical that was near her was the halophane.
A little backstory on Paul Benardo. Paul was obsessed with virgins, and Karla was no virgin when they met. So to him, the next best thing was his girlfriend's younger virgin sister. Halophane was the drug that Karla smuggled from her old pet center and used it to drug her sister, where she applied it to her face and held a rug soaked in the drug close to her face. She passed out. Karla and Paul did the unthinkable to her, and after they were done, she died. What I didn't tell you was that halophane is very toxic. So in reality, Karla gifted her own sister to her boyfriend to get on Christmas. The cops at this point were desperate. They needed Karla Homolka's testimony in order to put Paul Benardo away forever. So they made a deal with the devil. And by deal, I mean they give this woman a plea deal. By this time, they don't know about Ken or the tapes. Well, here are the terms to the plea deal. First, she had to plead guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter, and she would get a lenient sentence. That's 5 years for Leslie, 5 years for Kristen, and 2 years for Tammy. The price for murdering her own sister was 2 years, making a total of 12 years in prison. Mind you, this was all happening behind closed doors. So it being behind closed doors, the police had no option but to put a publication ban on the plea deal, so no media outlet could cover it, or the case.
Good evening. Gag order.
Canadians anxiously awaiting details were shocked when the judge announced there would be a news blackout. All I'm legally allowed to tell you is Karla Homolka was convicted of manslaughter and she got 12 years in jail. If we tell you anything more than that, we're breaking the law.
If we thought that there was a way of publishing information that would be legal, we'd do it.
When Ken Murray found out about the deal, this is what he said.
I said before that the Crown may have made a deal with the devil. I didn't think it would go quite this far.
A few days later, Ken Murray decides not to defend Paul Benardo, and he volunteered to drop the case. Here's something I want you to understand. If Ken Murray came forward with these tapes, Karla's credibility would have been shattered to a million pieces, and there would be no plea deal. So Ken Murray is off the case, and in comes John Rosen, aka Mr. Murder, on account of how many murder cases he's done. And this changes everything. Here's why.
Mr. Murray is discharged, and I'm taking possession of the file.
John Rosen gets possession of the tapes, watches them, and goes to his new client, Paul Benardo, and tells him he was handing over the tapes to the cops. End of story. The police are now viewing the tapes, and their star witness is no longer a victim, but an accomplice. However, the sad fact is they already gave her a plea deal, and they couldn't rip it up because they would lose credibility moving forward when it comes to plea deals. You know what's interesting? The police found footage of another victim that Karla never told them about, nor did she ever come forward. Her name is Jane Doe, and Karla was the mastermind behind this one. Jane Doe was her friend. She brought her home, tranquilized her, and her, with her husband, sexually assaulted her. So the police still need Karla's testimony because there was no visual evidence of him actually killing these two teenage girls. But now Jane Doe is in the picture, and Homolka didn't tell them about it. The cops had to cover their own asses and the credibility of their key witness. So they hire psychiatrists all the way from California who diagnosed her with traumatic amnesia. I call it whitewash. You call it what you want. They're still trying to paint her as a victim, even though it was clear in the tapes that she brought Jane Doe to the house and drugged her. May 18th, 1995, trial day. This was where Karla Homolka was going to go head to head with Paul Benardo, the accuser versus the accused. And Canadians were eager to be in that courtroom. People camped out of the courthouse overnight just to get a chance to see this, because indeed this was Canada's biggest case at the time.
Some details of the murders in what has become Canada's trial of the century.
The courtroom was full of silence. You could smell the intensity in the air. The media was all over the case. The tapes were played in the courtroom, and the jury was so disgusted by the acts on these tapes that they would look away. One of the victims' parents almost collapsed in the courtroom because she heard her little girl pleading to these monsters for her life. It goes even further to show Karla in Tammy's clothes, imitating Tammy after she died, all in the hopes to satisfy her husband Paul. Like I said, they could whitewash her all they wanted, but the fact of the matter is, they indeed made a deal with the devil. Paul takes the stand and blames all the murders on Karla. Paul Benardo said he did not want to kill these girls. He wanted to let them go because they were blindfolded. They didn't know who he was or where they were. However, he said, Karla wanted them dead. You see, Paul confessed to everything, the serial and the sexual sadism, but he said he was not a killer. According to Paul Benardo, Kristen was already dead by the time he came back from a food run, and the only person she was left with was Karla. Karla takes to the stand, and cross-examination after cross-examination, she was like a deer caught in headlights because she was caught off guard by John Rosen, who knew exactly who he was dealing with. She came back stronger after every cross-examination, exposing herself that she was not going down and she was not going to let anyone push her around, hence she wasn't a traumatized victim. The more she did this, the more the jury hated her, and the lower her credibility fizzled. 31st August 1995, the trial ended and the jury had a dilemma during the deliberation. And on the 1st of August 1995, Paul Benardo was found guilty on all counts including murder. The families didn't get justice. They had to settle with the verdict. The family's last remarks, man, they brought me to tears. Just take a listen.
This is our statement. The intensity of the overwhelming pain and strong emotions have once again swept us and rendering it impossible for us to adequately talk about the death of Leslie and what this moment really means to us. We, Deb, Ryan, and myself have been through hell during the past 4 years and know there are many more months and years ahead of us. Only the trial is over. Leslie is still not coming home.
Today, the guilty verdict for first-degree murder, there is some sort of closure. Well, it can't return our daughter to us. We have the satisfaction of seeing this perpetrator punished. Our final words for our daughter, with the trial over, Christy, have you heard anymore? We love you.
There was another trial for the Scarborough rapes and Tammy's death, and that found Paul Benardo as a dangerous offender, where he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And Homolka, 12 years with the possibility of parole in 2 years. 4th of July 2005. Karla Homolka is released from prison as two identical minivans pull away from prison, and one of them has Karla Homolka in it. Homolka is now living somewhere in Canada, and she has 3 kids and a husband. The parents that lost their children in the 90s were never vindicated. Jane Doe never got justice because the woman that drugged her and violated her still walks among us. She might have changed her name, but she will never change her past, and her children have to grow up knowing what she did. The people who were involved in these cases, well, some of them lost their marriages due to stress. Some were diagnosed with PTSD. Some wanted to take their own lives, and others were diagnosed with depression. Some stopped working entirely due to that case. Karla Homolka and Paul Benardo. Well, this couple ruined more lives than they actually knew. Was there justice served? No justice was served on 1st of August 1995. There's nothing you or me could do about it. The only thing we could do is bite our lower lip, just move on. To the victims of this heinous couple, Tammy, Leslie, Kristen, may they find peace in the next world. And to Jane Doe, may she find peace in this world. As far as I'm concerned, this case is closed. I've been your online inspector, Jeff Truman. Thank you for watching The Jeff Truman Show, and always remember to keep trekking, fam. Before you go, quick question. Have you ever wanted to end the lives of any girl or guy who has ever rejected you? Because I might know someone who did, and his name is Elliot Roger.